we talk about British fasteners. So we start off, well, I started off, I bought a TD in 1968, and in the toolbox were some tools. And I just seem to remember that there was a wrench in there that said 21/64ths on it. And I just, in my little pea brain, I said, there's no way any manufacturer is going to make something with 21/64ths. That's just too bizarre. I mean, 22/64ths is 11/32. I mean, but why would you even use that on some production car? Anyway, I knew something was going on, but I didn't know what. It wasn't until I was in the Army and I took my TD into the base workshop and was working on it and complained to the guy in the tool room that some of the tools I had wouldn't work. He says, "Well, that's because it's got British threads on it." And Whitworth is often, oh my gosh, all the time I hear people call it Wentworth. It's not Wentworth, it's Whitworth. And actually, the threads on a TD are not Whitworth or British Standard Fine, but I'll get into that. So that's where I first learned about British threads. Later on, a couple years later, when I got out of the U.S. Army and I was starting to restore my car, my TD, it took it all apart. I mean, all apart, way too far. My dad's advice was, well, don't buy a bunch of wrenches that you're not going to need later on. I think I still have some of those wrenches. But at the time when you went into a tool store, a tool and fastener store, like Napa, something like that, they had wrenches hanging on little displays, and they included British wrenches. They were you could buy them off the shelf. In 1970, that of course has changed a lot. So British Standard Whitworth. British Standard Whitworth, this thread form was invented, designed by Dr. Joseph Whitworth in 1841 and quickly became industry standard across England and across the empire. Is a great, I mean, just standardized. You argue all day about whether it's good or bad, but it was standardized, and England used the thread form to rule the world. It's wonderful. British Standard Whitworth is the coarse form of the two different threads. There's British Standard Fine and British Standard Whitworth. British Standard Fine is the thread that you find in the TDs and the TCs and the TFs, and a little bit, just a little tiny bit later on here and there, but the cars were all made with their own thread. Those threads are 55 degrees. The angle of the thread, the angle of a American thread is a little wider, 60 degrees, but the British Standard threads are all 55 degrees. Excuse me. So he calculated what the head size should be. In American, of course, you've got a 5/16 shank, 5/16 bolt, and you put a head on the top of it, and it's a 1/2 inch AF across flats. That works. But Dr. Whitworth was Mr. Engineer and decided that he would come up based on the metallurgy of the time and came up with a head for the 1/4 inch shank at 0.525, which is just over 1/2 inch. And so that was the size of the head on Whitworth bolts. In 1922, the metal had changed a lot. And so now there was a clamor that they didn't have to put such large heads on the bolts. So they jumped the fractional size up so that the wrench, which is designated 1/4 W, Whitworth, also fits 5/16 BSF. So the wrench in your hand, sometimes, if it's a good wrench, is labeled both in Whitworth and in British Standard Fine. But it's the same width, it just has to do with the size of the shank, which can be confusing until you get onto it, and then it seems to make sense. Then, I don't know, it must have been about 1982, we're working on a T-type engine. I thought, what are these pipe threads? What kind of pipe threads are these? And I called Chip Old, who was the tech guy for the New England MGT register for, oh my gosh, 25 years. And I called Chip because everybody's phone number used to be labeled in the magazine and everything. And I said, Chip, what's going on? And he goes, well, that's British Standard pipe. Little did I know. So now there's a British Standard pipe. Those threads are also at 55 degrees, and they're not interchangeable with American pipe thread. Now you can force them in, but that's just forcing. So most of the British Standard pipe threads that we see are parallel threads, not taper threads. When you think of pipe thread, you always think of a taper thread, and you tighten them up until you get interference. But all the bolts and threads that have to do with water or fuel or oil on our car are all British Standard pipe thread. If you buy a metric tool set today, or a tap and die set, just something off Amazon, down in the corner, there's a little tiny die and maybe a tap too that says 1/4 BSB. So British Standard pipe is still being used a lot out there because metric didn't have a pipe thread for a long time. I don't know if they do now or not, but British Standard pipe was industry standard throughout the world, except here in this country where it was national pipe thread. So now we've got British Standard Whitworth, British Standard Fine, British Standard pipe. Now we've got little tiny threads called that are numbered 0 through 8. That's what we see. I don't think we got any 8s in a car, maybe inside the clocks and maybe inside the speedo or tack or something, they go that small. But we got British Association threads. The most common is 2BA. Fortunately, 2BA is all but the same as 1032. So you can go to the hardware store and buy a whole handful of 1032 Phillips screws or something and have them fit all the nuts and bolts on the car. It's really nice. 4BA, which is also common, has no equivalent at your local Ace hardware store here or even Canadian Tire. So we got British Association. These were designed by I think a Frenchman named Thury, Thury. He doesn't get any distance, whereas Whitworth does. His name is associated with his threads. Anyway, these BA threads, the flank size is much pointier at 47.5 threads per inch. And you start at 0BA, which is a 6 millimeter thread, and then, or 6 millimeter shank, and then you reduce for each size, you reduce 0.9. Why 0.9? At each size, you reduce it 0.9, and then there's a change in threads per inch also. But these are the small screws that you find most commonly around the carburetors and anything that fastens electrical components and so forth to the firewall. So a 2BA is 0.185 in diameter, and a 3/16 is 0.1875. So the 1032 is only 2.5 thousandths larger than the 2BA, and the 2BA has got a pitch of I have to read this, 31.36 threads per inch versus 32 threads per inch. So it'll always work. So you can always screw them together. It's not the same on some other stuff that we're going to come to where you run into real interference. You just can't get the threads to screw together. But all those little threads, all those little screws in the car, the machine screws, those are all BA. The nuts that hold the instruments on the back, those are BA threads. We also have British Standard cycle thread. So British Standard cycle thread, everything above 1/2 inch is 26 threads per inch, and is very easily confused with British Standard brass thread. British Standard brass thread is also 26 threads per inch, but it's at 55 degrees, whereas British Standard cycle is at 60. Where does this even show up? The two places where you find British Standard brass thread are the threads that hold the dash pots into the top of the SU carburetors. It's 11/16 26. It just, that thread exists no other place but there. And then the wing nuts for the TC, TD, TF folding windscreen. When you spin the nuts loose on the edge and fold the windscreen down and tighten it back up, those are either British Standard Cycle or British Standard Brass. I'm not sure which. They're both 5/16 26. And I've never got down in there tightly enough to see if it's a 55-degree fit angle, flank angle, or a 60-degree flank angle. But anyway, the British Standard Brass thread shows up in different places. That's always 26 threads per inch because brass tubing never is very thick, and so you can't get a more coarser thread without perforating the tubing or getting the inner diameter, diameter of the thread too small. Then we got metric thread, just plain old metric thread, and metric thread is great. It's really easy to understand. Oh my gosh, it's all straightforward. So beginning after the Second World War, when Morris was having his engines built temporarily at the Continental Motor Corporation in Muskegon, Michigan, right up the road from me, along with other places, because Britain was not in full war production during World War I. It was in World War II. They learned from their mistakes. But after the war was over, then Morris went to the machinists that they used for machining their castings, a firm called Pop and White. And Pop and White said, "Hey, we're still under some contracts. We cannot do your engines." So Morris is casting about looking for somebody who can do his engines, and he finds Hotchkiss, which had been in England during the First World War, making machine guns. They claimed they were making surveying equipment, but they were making machine guns, and they were hungry for any kind of contract that they could get after the war. But everything they had was metric. So they finally decided, all right, okay, we'll do metric fasteners, but we can't ask the British to buy metric wrenches. First of all, it's cultural appropriation. It's an anathema to have to use something French if you're English. So because metric is French, they weren't going to make the mechanics buy the wrenches. And then the other standard excuse was, well, we didn't want to have to get all these guys to have two sets of wrenches like any mechanic does today in the United States, or three if you're working on British cars, including American metric and British. So anyway, they just said, Leonard Lord said, well, here's the solution. Let's put a BSF cap on a metric shank. So that's where these Nuffield Metric bolts come from that are common in the T-type engine and gearbox. So you can use a metric bolt, which is extremely close. A 13mm head on an 8mm shank is all but the same as a 5/16 British, but it's not the same. Very, very close. It'll work, certainly. But everything having to do with the inside of the engine, of the engine and gearbox on the T-types is metric. Everything on the outside of the engine, most everything on the outside of the engine is still BSF, but all the internal threads are metric, but your British wrench fits them. So it's real easy to get this stuff mixed up. A 5/16 24 bolt and an 8x1 metric bolt look almost exactly the same. One's got 24 threads per inch, one's got 25.6. One of them, the diameter is 5/16, which is a 3125. And I got to look on my cheat sheet here, and the other one is 3150. So they're really close, but they will not screw into each other more than maybe a turn or a turn and a half. And then it starts to jam up, unlike putting a 1032 screw into a 2BA nut. That works out okay. But the larger ones don't. So T-type engines are all metric on the inside and not ISO metric, French metric, that's what we call it, which is a little finer. So when you go to the hardware store and look at an 8mm bolt, it comes in two sizes. 1.5 is coarse and 1.25 is fine, but ours are 1.00. That means there's 1mm separating the threads, or in the case of the 125, 1.25 millimeters separating the threads, or the coarse one, 1.5, which is about 18 threads per inch. You can get mixed up. There goes that mute all button. So, okay. So anyway, so we've got metric and the Nuffield metric bolts that go on the T-type engines. Because of Lend-Lease in the phenomenal amount of equipment that was being sent into England during the Second World War, they had to come up with a thread. They could have just adopted SAE and USS, American Fine and American Coarse. They could have just done that, but there's pride involved. So they came up with a system which was completely interchangeable with SAE and USS, called UNF, Unified National Fine, and Unified National Coarse. You can use these with American nuts and bolts back and forth, and it's just great. MGBs, MGAs and MGBs are built with UNF and UNC threads. We call them American threads. They are American threads, but they're a British manufacturer. The wheel, the spinners use Rudge Whitworth threads. So Rudge and Whitworth are two different bicycle manufacturers. They combined and they ended up making wire wheels. And there's a Rudge Whitworth thread. There's Acme threads on the kingpins, on the TD and the TF. There's a lot of different threads inside the car. Let me just go to page 2 here. I don't want to bore you too much more, but we've got bottle closure threads. You know, there's for the windshield washer solvent, or the brake master cylinder, you know, or the gurling cylinders with the great big metal caps on them. Those have got bottle closure threads. And light bulbs, all light bulbs have got threads, where it's a miniature bulb or a Lilliput miniature bulb, and those are all defined in different places. E5, E25, all having to do with the threads on there. So there's a lot of threads, and I haven't even gone into the inside of the clocks, the tack and the speedo and stuff like that, because I've never had those apart. I don't know if those are I don't know what kind of threads those are. BA threads, I don't know. I'm expect maybe once I open it up here, we'll find out. So for identification, a British bolt has got a circle on the head, circle in the middle. I didn't bring one to hold up here, and then 3 lines at 120 degrees out. And the 3 lines means that it's a grade 5. Whereas an American bolt, those lines go right into the middle. So there's a circle on the British thread. And very often on the British thread, the name of the manufacturer is stamped in the top. Linread, Linread, or RO for Ruberry Owen, who made the wheels on the MGBs and Midgets. The Nuffield Metric bolts are not stamped. They're turned up individually, and they're not stamped by manufacturer because they were made for their proprietary nuts and bolts, and they're made for the Nuffield organization, or BMC. So those don't have any name stamped on top of them. If you want to use original nuts and bolts in your car, nothing goes wrong with a nut or a bolt. Well, they get rusty, they look crappy, or they can be broken off, or the threads can be stripped. But if it's just a normal bolt and you want to showcase your original nuts and bolts, you can send off and get your nuts and bolts plated, find a zinc plater. So right now I can take about a third of a 5-gallon pail, which is about as much as I can carry. It's a lot of weight, and take it to my local plater. And I think he charges me $100. And I collect nuts and bolts. I collect new nuts and bolts and old stuff, and anything that the cover from your turn signal box on your TD, TF, or MGA, anything that's metal that can be plated. I put that all in the mix, and then send it out and get it plated. And when you get the stuff back, it's bright zinc. It's really nice. It looks really nice. I don't do that with studs that hold things together, like important studs, like cylinder head studs or main bearing bolts or something. I don't get those plated. Forrest Johnson, who took over my shop and trades as Rusty Moose Garage, said that something happens to the metallurgy of the bolt when they dump it into the aqua regia to strip off everything on the bolt before they plate it. So they subtract a little bit of metal from the bolts and then put a little bit of zinc back on. So for holding fenders on and stuff like that, it's just great. But holding the calipers on or cylinder heads on, maybe that's not such a good idea, although I have done that in the past. So there's some weird ones here. So let me just explain sort of overall. The T-types were all British thread, completely. Not completely. There's every rule that I have has exceptions, but the TD was British Standard Fine, British Standard Fine, British Standard Whitworth, British Standard Pipe. Real early, maybe 1952, maybe late 51, they changed the lug nuts. They changed the lug nuts to American fine thread. They did that. And I got a note from Dave Brown, who's the tech guy for the MGB register, and he told me that he came upon a TD one time where the spare tire carrier had BSF bolts holding on the spare tire, where they had American bolts holding on the wheels. But I just don't think that probably came out of a production car. Someone must have swapped that. Well, I mean, who knows? But my guess is that somebody probably swapped the spare tire carrier. So then when you move to the MGA, they get rid of all the British thread and go completely American thread. Well, Unified National Coarse, Unified National Fine, still British pipe, still BA for the small fasteners. But there was this wholesale change right at the introduction of the MGA. And then that carried through into the MGB. And there's very, very little metric on any of our cars, except the T-types and all the Lucas electrics after, I think, 1969. Lucas went from British Standard to metric. They never went through the Unified National Coarse or Unified National Fine. That's what I read, but I know by practice that there are some American or UNC, UNF fasteners within Lucas components in the cars that I've serviced. 1975 through 1980, the brake master cylinder, the three fittings that go into there are 10 by 1.00 metric. They look almost exactly the same as 3/8-24, which is the whole rest of the braking system, American thread, 3/8-24. But the fittings that go into the master cylinder themselves are metric. So the MGA lost all the metric out of the engine and gearbox, except the thread that accepts the gear lever knob. The gear lever on an MGA is the same part number as for a T-type. And the thread on the top of that, onto which you screw the knob, gear lever knob, that's 8x1 metric. The very earliest MGAs, and by very earliest, I mean the first couple hundred only, still used BSF on the rear axle. So the whole rest of the car has got American thread in it, but just the rear axle. Why? Because they must have been trying to use up stuff or something. The rear axles are still BSF, so you just have to be when you're in. God knows what people have done in the meantime, swapping stuff around. And what else do they want to say? That on the TFs, when you move from TD to TF, the entire rear axle on the TF is American thread, not British thread anymore. The rear axle housing, the bolts that hold it together, and there's a lot more threads in the car. There's a lot more stuff going on here and there, but I'm here to answer any questions that you've got about the threads or other notes that you may have. And Fred Horner, I'm interested in one thread on the SU carburetor that I don't understand. So anyway, I'm through with my little lecture tonight. Oh my God, I've chewed up 45 minutes. Thank you for hanging on. So, comments about threads or questions about threads?
Hey, John.
Yes.
One quick thing on the 1032s. When did they transition from Phillips to Posidrive on the small thread stuff?
I don't know. How's that? I don't know.
What I found is that it seems like MGA was still Phillips, but when they went to MGB, it was Posidrive. But I'm not sure of that.
I'm not either. I hardly ever use the word Posidrive when I'm talking about heads. I always say Phillips because the Phillips screwdriver fits it, and I know there's a difference, and I know it has to do with torque.
The Posidrive head of a pan head screw has little points, little tabs sticking out from the corners. And sometimes there's like a circle on top, but the Phillips doesn't have any of that. So that's one way of recognizing. And if you look closely at a Posidrive, there's little extra corners inside where the bit fits in there for the Posidrive to help it grip better. So those are some of the differences.
Okay. So my question to you is the vacuum line that goes on the rear MGA carburetor body. What thread is that? That's
still kind of a mystery to me.
Okay, all right. I thought we've talked about this before.
I think it's like 1/4 28, but I'm not quite sure.
7x1 seem to fit too, but it's so short.
It's not metric.
Okay.
Yeah. But the closest I've gotten is I believe 1/4 28.
Yeah, but that's American thread. That doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense.
It's very close to like a BA thread, but
the BA starts at 6mm, and that's smaller than 1/4, isn't it?
Well, again, I guess with the BA, typically BA is a fine thread like metric, whereas this is definitely a coarser thread than a metric.
Anyway, okay, well, that continues to be a mystery in my head. All right, okay. So do we have any other people that have questions about nuts and bolts? Please ask at least one.
Yes, I have a question.
Okay, Gloria.
Okay, Bob's not here, so that's why I'm asking this. Okay, we were rebuilding a caliper. We got some calipers to rebuild. And there's this, you were talking about some of the bolts, or are different. Now I can't, well, let me put it up to the, you see this bolt right here? What is that?
3/8 fine.
It's fine, okay.
3/8
So if we
fine.
are to, so if I'm to replace it, what do I get? Should I,
It's just a blank, it's a blanking plug for a cross drilling. So,
okay,
so, I think the head on that is a whole lot smaller. I think that's the, you can put a bleeder in there, you could.
okay,
And, you can put a 3/8 bolt, although that's got a pretty good sized head. I want to say that bolt you just showed me has got maybe like a 7/16 head on it. So it's
okay.
smaller. Why do you have to, all it does is, you know,
Okay, just block it.
you can just take it out. You can put that bolt, if you want to make it look prettier, you can dress it up just a little bit on a stone in a grinder or something or other, and then, and just put it right back in again.
Well, we got another caliper to rebuild and it doesn't have that bolt in it. And so we got to find another bolt to put in there. So
Okay,
it's just a little project down the road.
okay.
What kind of car is this from?
The
MGB,
MGB.
Thank
because that's the, oh, who's got that on right now? Who's that, Judd? Is that your windshield
Yeah.
stanchion?
Yeah,
So
but you can't see the thread. I don't know why I can't get it in the picture, but
that's okay, that's right, that's 5/16, that's 5/16 26, but is it British Standard Brass or British Standard Cycle? It isn't gonna make any difference, it's gonna fit anyway. And I do have a note into Calvin at Moss about their part number, I think it's 225-400, which is the wing nut. And if I can get him to tell me what that thread is, then I'll know, Judd, what to tell you on this. But I don't believe I'm going to be able to get an answer tonight. I know I'm not going to be able to get an answer tonight.
right. Well, when Gloria was talking about the caliper, because I just rebuilt the right side caliper on my MGA and bought the kit that's got new, I destroyed the rotor. So a new rotor and pads from Moss.
Mhm.
They look beautiful. The only problem is they don't fit. The pads are, each pad is a millimeter too thick.
Yep, I
Nothing,
had,
nothing that my belt sander couldn't take care of. So I just threw away a couple of thousand miles of braking. It goes in, the car runs and stops beautifully.
great.
The MGA, I think, also has that blanking plug on the top, and that's why I was wondering what kind of caliper that was.
Actually, the MGA has two bleeders. So there's a bleeder on,
You're
on
right.
both sides.
That's right. Bleeder on both sides.
By the time they got to the MGB, they've got a cross drilling, and supposedly the air is supposed to exit from the outside and be able to come out into the bleeder area through that cross drilling, which is what Gloria is trying to cover up. Any
So
more?
now that you're on that, what are the thread pattern for the bleeders? I saw some are metric, some are this, some are that.
No, none of them are metric, not original stuff. So all the T-type bleeders are BSF 3/8 22 BSF, and all the MGBs are 3/8 24 SAE or UNF, whichever one you choose. But it's American thread for all the MGAs in the midgets are all 3/8 24.
Except a lot of the replacement cylinders, I've seen are kind of wonky.
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of like 7mm bleeders on MGB rear brake cylinders.
yes.
So you have to be really careful about mixing and matching. And I was just working on an MGA that was rebuilt 10, 15 years ago. And I could not get a wrench to fit on the clutch slave cylinder bleeder. It wouldn't fit a 7/16. It wouldn't fit like a I don't know, 8mm, 9mm. I don't know what it is. So I just used an adjustable, but I have no idea what it is.
One of the bleeders on the MGA caliper was either buggered up or a different size. I think maybe somebody put a different size in because it didn't thread in and out quite as easy.
Well, boy, brakes, you want to be so careful with brakes. Yeah, that car that I bled out at the GT out in Oregon week before last, that one was that had, I don't know, 10mm, 8mm bleeders on it. I don't know what the threads were. I assume the threads were still 3/8 American, but I have no idea. But anyway, that was disconcerting. So the greatest number of threads in any individual component are the carburetors. The engine, an engine, like take an MGB engine or an MGA engine, you got coarse thread, American coarse, American fine, British standard pipe. And then on the front of the crank, you got a BSF. Peter Beadle straightened me out on that a couple of years ago. And even though it looks like it could be an American thread because it's I don't know, 3/4 14 or I don't know, something or other. But it's a pretty good sized thread. But anyway, it is, so there are four different threads if you count the crank. Whereas in the carburetor, like for a MGA carburetor, you got British standard brass up on the dampers. You got British standard Whitworth, the 2 screws that hold the suction chambers on. You got British standard fine that hold the cap on the float bowl. You got British standard pipe on the underside where the gland nut goes in. You got British standard brass again on the adjusters down underneath. You got British Association for the interconnecting links, and then the unknown thread that neither Fred nor I can define yet. And I think, I want to say that I contacted, probably Calvin out at Moss and asked him, and he just said it's supplied to us by a third party supplier, and he said I don't have, I have no information about what thread that is.
It's a secret.
It's a secret. Yeah. Yeah. So do we have some more questions about nuts and bolts?
Yes, David
I have
Maskey.
a question.
Yeah, Dave Mass, go ahead, Dave, you're up.
Yeah, I'm a lot of us rebuild on the MGA, the windshield,
Yeah,
and those are always, well, first of all, the part that puts them together at the corners, you want to use your original because whoever provides whatever is not, and those screws that they provide aren't working either. So other than the suggestion of use your original always, do you have any idea about those?
well, that MGA windscreen, the most important rule is don't like measure the screw, put it all together without any glass in it, because if your screw is one thread too long and it comes out and touches the glass, you got to start all over again with a new piece of glass. So up in the corners, somebody was providing those without any holes drilled in them. So you had to lock it up in place and then drill it and tap it. 1032. God knows it's originally 2BA, but 1032 works. So
I believe they're all BA. I believe they're all BA, and Cecilia at Scarborough Fair supplies all the correct screws for that.
Okay.
She does have them, but Moss doesn't.
I know some of those corner fittings were supplied without The bottom ones are okay. They're just metal. You can twist those around, bang them around, turn them and stuff. But the top ones are cast and without grinding off the side of them or something or other to get the holes to line up. Somebody was providing them without holes for a while. That was probably some time ago. So anyway, David, that's as much information as I've got, but thanks for that comment about keeping your old one. But of course, that pin that comes up just gets knackered. And of course, that's one of the pieces you want to change. So putting the old one in is like yucky, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I had mine re-chromed.
That's what re-chroming is all about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
Also regarding those pins, up until about 1958 or so, they were brass. Then they went to steel.
Okay. Okay, interesting. Interesting. And the threads change. The threads change on the top. Those wing nuts are the difference between TFs and MGAs. I think they'd probably go from British thread to American thread or
No,
something.
they're not American. They're like 5/16 28 or something. They
26
are,
probably British center brass, probably.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. And but the wing nuts that hold the side curtains on, those change. There are when you go to the round ones on the MGA, those American thread, the earlier ones are probably they look so coarse, they're probably Whitworth, but I can't remember. So anyway, it's a smattering of stuff all over. You have to be aware that there are all these thread forms. And if you've got a micrometer and a gauge with teeth in it, you can take a look at a bolt and immediately tell if it's 5/16 by 24 or 8 by 1.00 metric. You can use your calipers and your gauges for that. And
one other thing regarding the windshield frames and the bows is those sockets for the studs.
For the doors?
They changed from copper in like the T series to painted steel in the MGA, but nobody sells those. You always have to buy the copper ones, but all the MGAs should be like a painted steel cup.
Interesting. Thank you.
Hey, John,
Yes.
I would like David Basili to ask his question from the chat.
Oh, yeah, sure. David, are you up?
I'll read it if he's
I
not.
am.
Okay,
Here we
go ahead, ask your question. I want to hear this.
Okay, John, my question was that you do not have to justify your,
Go ahead.
you don't have to justify your expenses. We all realize the expenses you have with this, and the value of these Zooms far exceed any explanation of expenses that you need to state every time we join this meeting.
You're very kind. You're very kind. Thank you.
But actually, I wanted the other one. I'll read it.
Okay.
I mean, thank you for the plug. But it seems like the British concept of fasteners and thread sizes might have been the thing that brought down the British automotive industry in the international market. How about that?
All right. No, what brought down the British car industry was losing their officer corps twice in rapid succession. 2 generations of officers were killed in battle, and they just didn't have enough supervisors to go around and run all the companies. So they had a problem at the top end. So that's what I'd put it to. And then there's another. Well, I've got 3 or 4 subjects I claim that if I ever go back to school, I'll push for a doctoral thesis on that. But really, I mean, you lose. You talk to the guys out in the plant. You talk to the guys in the field. What do the bosses do? What do the officers do? Nothing. They don't do anything. They just sit in their offices and drink coffee and smoke cigarettes, and they don't do anything, but they do something. They offer direction. And without those guys, there's no direction. And I mean, there are a whole lot of forces involved. Whistler wrote his doctoral thesis at London School of Economics, Timothy Whistler, which was it was reduced to a magazine article called "The Defeat of the Triumph." Catchy title, but it had to do with the collapse of the British automobile industry, and they didn't know their export market, the United States. They didn't know why they were selling cars here. They didn't know why the cars sold here. They didn't have a friggin' clue. In the early 50s, there was Wolseley that was brought in under Nuffield before they became BMC, and they put the gear lever between the door and the seat, and the driver's seat, so you could still shift with your left hand. I don't know how you get out of the car with the gear lever there, but it's just stuff like that. It's just like, what are you guys thinking? Well, you know, and when Michael Edwards was tasked by Margaret Thatcher to slice up British Leyland into 4 great big parts and sell it. One of the first steps was to shut down MG, and they had no idea. I mean, with their accounting, they had no idea how much money they were losing on each vehicle. They knew they were losing money on each vehicle, but they didn't know how much. It was just such a massive accounting. And then when they did pull MG and said, we're going to put all of our new effort into the TR7, the Bullet, the shape of things to come, the safest car British Leyland ever made, because they're all in the shop. So, hey, that's what they joked about it in England about it. There was a group of American automobile dealers, MG dealers, who went to England and said, over half of your sales in this country are MG, even though they weren't even on the mark. Remember the mark at the big signs, Jaguar, Rover, Triumph? MG wasn't even on the sign, and they accounted for over half the sales. Anyway, don't get me going. I'm sorry, I'm off on a tangent here.
Okay, John, one thing I would just say about your analysis of military officers, you know, being an Army guy that you are, I can understand your perspective. But if you're an Air Force guy, officers were the ones who did the fighting. They were the ones in the cockpits, and they were the ones who led and bled during World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Different situation in the Army, but not the Air Force.
Okay. But there's still a tremendous loss of life. So, but not my perspective of the officers not doing anything. Yes, all right, okay, I got it. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. If we don't have any more questions on nuts and bolts, I'm gonna kick over to the chat section tonight.
John, I had a quick question.
Yeah, John.
Can you give a little insight into how you became able to retain all of the knowledge of the different thread systems and the tools you use to which to work with them?
Yeah, I have to talk to my parents. I think it's genetic. So I don't know, beats me. I've got a pretty good memory of things that happened in the past. Maybe not yesterday. I'm not sure. I do know what I had for breakfast this morning, but yeah, I've just, some people have great memories. Some people are able to have great analytic ability.
John, I've always wanted to ask a professional mechanic this.
Yeah.
What our shade tree mechanics do is reach in the toolbox and pick up 4 wrenches. Hopefully they're the ones that are double-ended that have a different size on each end. And between those 4 wrenches, probably one of them fits the nut or bolt that we're trying to do things on. Is that how professional mechanics do it?
Not me. Not me. I got all my wrenches all lined up, and I know.
But can you look at a bolt head and say, I need a 7/16?
Sure. Oh yeah, that's easy. 11/16 and 3/4 sometimes gets me a bit, you know, and maybe a steering wheel nut. I'll look at that and go, now, is that 1 1/8 or is that 1? So yeah, and of course that depends on the year. There's 4 different steering wheel nuts on an MGB. So yeah, anyway, but no, I can just take a look at it. I remember when I was buying nuts and bolts, I think I was buying nuts and bolts. We're in a tool store in Battle Creek, Michigan, my hometown, little tiny hometown of Marshall. This is when I was restoring my TD. And we're over there buying nuts and bolts. My buddy was restoring an MGA at the same time. And I said, man, if I ever had a nut and bolt store, I'd have some great big charts up on the wall, and things you see in the hardware store today. You know, you can lay a bolt up against it and get the pitch and the diameter, or thread it into a bolt to see if it's the right bolt. And my buddy said to me, I bet after you've worked here for 2 years, you don't need charts like that. And I don't need a chart like that most of the time. I always reach for the right wrench, unless it's at 11/16, 3/4, 13/16 range, and I get my eyes aren't so good with that.
John,
Yeah.
have you read Earning the American Dream by Gordon? Read that. He
All
talks
right.
about the car industry and how he worked them for so many years and then went to work for a Japanese company. And the differences between management styles and how they were involved with the workers. It's a good read. I read it a long time ago.
Hey. Yeah.
Try- Yeah.
Thank you for reminding me. Yep.
John, can I jump back to the MGA windshield?
Absolutely.
I'm one of those people that tightened the one thread too many.
Well, it's funny now. Yeah.
It was, but what I just wanted to say was Cecilia was great on that and sending me a windshield to start with.
Oh, how nice.
And was great with telling me which were the correct bolts to go in the correct holes. She was great at it, and I got custom sewed to deal with, but delivery was great to the box and everything. So
Right.
just plug that way.
When I explained a little bit right in the beginning about my trials and tribulations with Delta. So my first flight out, I'm sitting in Portland. I'm scrolling on my phone, waiting for the announcement that they're going to delay the flight. But this is far before that, and this arm goes around me. It's John. Looked up to Cecilia. So I got to sit with her for, I don't know, maybe 3 hours, you know, as we talked about everything, family and other shops and other people and products and the whole works. So I got to sit with her for a long time.
Did you get a word in edgewise?
I did. That was a long time. It was a long time sitting there. So, yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you.
John, I've got a question. Do you in the US make a difference between a set screw and a bolt?
A set screw would have we would normally claim that it's got an Allen head in it normally, and the end of the bolt would be tapered so that it could run up against something. It wouldn't have its full diameter. It would be tapered slightly to about half of the diameter of the bolt. That would be a set screw.
Okay, so in the UK, we would call a set screw something that's threaded the whole length of the shank, and a bolt, which is normally threaded, you know, like half the length, that's a bolt. So a lot of people talk about nuts and bolts, but it's kind of nuts, bolts, and set screws.
Okay. I'm going to write that one down because I don't have that. I do not believe I've got that in my so much for my.
Isn't that called a grub screw in the UK?
No, a grub screw would be pointed and probably have a hex. It would probably have a recess for an Allen head.
Yeah, that the grub screw in the UK is like a set screw in the US, I believe.
Yep, I think that's where I was going with that. So yeah, isn't that fascinating? Threaded full length or threaded part length? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, one of the big things on a lot of the cars, such as your drive shaft, is you don't want to have a fully threaded bolt in your drive shaft. It should be a unthreaded portion that takes up that any play in the torque of your drive shaft or your flange. A lot of people put in just a fully threaded bolt, and it's going to wear out like crazy.
And I think that's why we have the difference between set screw and bolt. For exactly, so one is holding in tension, and one is holding in a radial motion.
That makes all the sense in the world.
And by the way, my father was a navigator in Lancasters in the Second World War, and most of the guys captaining a plane were non-commissioned officers, so they were normally flight sergeants. I'm with you on the officer class, John, but most Air Force people who were pilots weren't commissioned, i.e. they weren't officers. But then you had the problem that, like, the gunner might be an officer, but the pilot might be a sergeant, but the pilot was still in charge.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, like the captain of a ship's the captain of the ship. It doesn't matter who's on board. Yeah.
What rank he is, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, in the United States Army, a lot of the pilots are warrant officers, and they live in this funny little limbo between a real officer and an enlisted man. But that's because the warrant officer actually works, whereas in the Air Force, the officer actually works. So,
Yeah, so we don't have warrant officers in the Air Force. We just have flight sergeants. Warrant officers are Army for us. And I think the reason the British motor industry failed was because the politicians got involved. Too much of the UK automotive industry was nationalized, unlike in the US. And governments just, they can't run most things, but certainly not automobile companies. And I agree with you about the officer class stuff, but that, I think, affected most industries. But I think particularly politicians running automotive industry is probably not great.
Yeah, well, that didn't start till 1967, when everybody was clamoring for a bailout. I mean, already that here I go on a rant. Already the coal industry, the shipbuilding industry, a lot of stuff had fallen under government operation. And where here in the States we've got corporations that run sort of independent. I mean, they are independently, they're owned, stockholder owned. The telephone companies, the power companies, although water and waste disposal are never, I don't know them to be private in this country. The fire departments are almost all public. There are still private ones in certain areas up by where Fred lives, someplace up there. But where was I going with this? I don't know.
Well, you have regulations, but you don't have ownership. So even your water company.
So everybody was, in that socialist movement that was going on after the war, and so the government, the car companies said, well, you bailed everybody else out, bail us out. And the government said to the car companies en masse, we will bail you out, but you all have to form under one great big banner. So all the car companies, not Ford, not General Motors, not Chrysler, not the ones way off on the edges, Aston Martin, Lagonda, Rolls-Royce, Bentley, TVR, Morgan, not little tiny little places, but all the big guys. They all threw together to the British Motor Holding Corporation in 1967 and 1968. It became British Leyland. They doubled their capitalization. The government bought the entire share, so now the government owned half the business. And they kept doing this over and over and over until 1980. The government, the private stockholders owned either 0.6 or 0.4% of the outstanding shares of stock, of whom I was one. I was a stockholder of British Leyland. And just so I could get their publications, I remember talking to the banker. He says, you're not expecting a return on this investment. I said, no, I think I spent 10 pounds or something to buy 10 shares or something. Anyway, then when Thatcher came in, she told Edwards to slice it up and sell it. So they sliced it up to make it a little more profitable, and MG went off to British Aerospace. And that worked for a little while until someone got some news that British Aerospace had also taken a favorable loan from the government so that they could buy the Austin Rover Group. So that was a done deal. They were EU rules or something, and then BMW bought them. And then BMW, once they figured out what they'd actually bought, realized what a horrible mistake they'd made. So they gave it back to now we've reduced the Austin Rover Group down to MG Rover, and that had yet to split. So it's a long history of stuff. But yeah, the government owned 99.5, rounded, 99.5% of British Leyland. No wonder it couldn't work. So anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm gonna go over because it's 8:17. I've got to get over to the chat section because Mark Goldfarb, if he's still on, is waiting. He's the first one up here, and he asked his question at 6:59. So, what are your thoughts on oil-filled versus epoxy coils? And your thoughts on installing the oil-filled upside down. Well, I don't know the difference between the two. I know the oil-filled ones used to be filled with PCBs, which is why linemen working for the power companies or the telephone guys always claimed that their incidence of cancer was higher because the transformers are always dripping PCB on the telephone linemen. So I don't have a feeling for one or the other, and I always install the coil upside down so that it looks original. And I don't think, Mark, I've ever had more than one or two ever that I remember actually leaking. So
Mine's upside down. I'm running a Protronics module in my 25D distributor. And for the last 2 years, I've been running Protronics 0.6 ohm coil, which they recommend with that unit. Without going long story short, I spent the last week and a half troubleshooting problems, and it turns out the coil was bad. I called Protronics, and the first thing they did was ask me how I had installed the coil. I said upside down. They said that's why it went bad. And I said, well, that's pretty strange because MGs have always come that way. I'm sure they're oil filled. In fact, I put my old Lucas coil back in. I'm sure it's not an original, but it's a pretty old coil. It works fine. So I was going to buy an epoxy filled coil, which you can install in any direction, and they're more money. And then I thought about it, and I thought, this is stupid. I mean, these have been installed upside down forever. So I canceled that order, and I bought somebody other than Protronics oil filled coil because everybody says, everything I've read says it can go any direction and doesn't matter.
Well,
so
they don't leak. I mean,
right.
I can't rationalize why someone would tell you that putting the coil one way or another would cause it to work or not. Doesn't make sense to me.
Or to me. And I called, and that was the sales guy. And I called back. The tech line, waited on hold for an hour, hoping to get a technician. The same guy answers the phone. So I came up with another reason to call him instead of saying, hey, I was hoping to get a better answer. So I just ordered a different coil, and I'm going to put it in upside down. And I mean, nobody seems to really have problems. I know some of the really cheapo Chinese ones do leak, but I don't think that's what this is. So it made no sense.
Yeah,
So
I usually just buy my coils, Eklund coils from Napa. And that you can always buy a Lucas sticker, someplace in the Moss catalog or Lucas stickers. You just put the sticker on the coil. So,
yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate it. That's you told me kind of what I expected. I'll put it in upside down and hope for the best.
Okay.
Good. Thanks, John. Thanks for everything you do.
Yeah.
Great
Oh,
discussion.
very kind. Thank you, Mark. Thanks. Wayne, the oil pipe that runs between the TD block and the head has a banjo type connection at each end. I had to remove it, and when I replaced it, it leaked. I first tried tightening the bolts, then replaced the washers with the new crush washers. The leak slowed. I replaced the washers with the oil pan plug seals and the washer at the bolt head, much less of a leak. How do I stop the leak? Turn the bolt tighter. So, I know that sounds, like rude or something, but you just got to get it tighter. It's
Also make sure you have both washers in place.
Okay, all right, okay, thank you. There's those banjos are sandwiched by the washers. I have in the past, I've taken the washers and I've tinned them, gobbed a bunch of solder on them, and so it tightens down and the extra solder gets pushed out to the side. But almost always it's just a failure to get those bolts tight enough.
They say that they work harden, the copper work hardens, so you can heat them up to soften them and then reinstall them.
Yeah, but Wayne said he put new ones on, I think. So, at one point. So I'd crank it tighter. I don't think I've ever broken one of those bolts. They're hollow. You think, oh my God, how much torque can these things take? But what else can you do?
I was just wondering if the banjo fitting itself had been deformed somehow and maybe wouldn't seal tight.
It's got to be, that banjo has got to be parallel. If one of them's off on the side like that, how is it going to seal? But how could it get like that? Just taking it off and putting it back on again. So.
I don't understand how that would happen either. I just don't know why it's such a problem, because I've never had a problem before with these leaking. They've always been really tight.
I see if you can move them another 10, 15 degrees,
Okay.
So with your 3/8 British BSF socket. Yeah.
Go back to the copper washers and just make it real tight.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Good
Thank
luck. Yep. Charles, everybody, 53 TF. My crankshaft pulley bolt has sheared off. Oh, ducky. How do I access and drill out the stud? Oh my gosh. Are you still on?
Yeah, I'm here. Here's the funny part. It might have been that way when I bought it 4 years ago.
Okay.
I've been driving around like that for 4 years and never realized it.
So my daughter's going to walk behind me. She just come in. She drives a 73 MG BGT and lives in Los Angeles. You can't go that way. I'll force you. Yeah. So just wave. Just wave. There we go. Okay. All right. So to get that bolt out of there, it probably snapped because someone got it too tight. Tightening it up. It probably didn't snap because it bottomed out. Because if it bottomed out and snapped off, you cannot get it out. There's no way you can get it out. But if somebody just tightened it up and got it too tight and it snapped off, then this is the way that I would do it. You got to get access to it, and I have reverse drills. So you drill it, so you get a nice hole in it, and then use a reverse drill and just get getting bigger and bigger. And that is 12. I think that's a 12 by 1.5 thread on that front pulley, I think. And it's not 10. I think it's 12. Same, or maybe it's even bigger than that, but it's metric. Anyway, keep using the reverse drill, and or if you've got a
easy out.
No such thing as an easy out. Well, you can always try it. But it's never easy. It's never easy. It's never easy. Sometimes you can weld a nub onto it. and then grab that nub with a vice grip and just unscrew it. Is the heat,
Yeah, the problem
Oh.
is it's recessed behind the end of the crank. I had
And
this
the other problem
You need to pull
is,
it.
am I talking about having to pull the radiator and the
Oh,
grill and
yeah.
everything to
Oh,
get
yeah.
to it?
Oh my God, yes. You gotta take the whole car apart. Yep. Yeah.
I had this on my MGTC engine. It was broken off when I got it. And a friend of mine made a guide that would fit into the end of the shaft so you can guide your drill to drill in the end, because normally it's a uneven surface. So you know, you're welcome to borrow this thing from me if you want, but you know, and John can be the go-between. But it basically guides in your drill bit, get it drilled out in the center, and then use a tap. It's usually not hard to get it out once you get a hole in it.
But if I do take out the radiator and the grill, that will give me enough room.
Yeah, you have to take all that out.
Or you can just leave it like that. Or here's another thing you can do, since it hasn't come off already, and you think maybe it wasn't there when you bought the car, because just offhand you would have heard it fall off at some point, or sling out or something or other. If you borrow this drill guide from Fred and drill it, and then end up tapping it like a quarter 28. You can just put a washer on it and put a quarter 28 bolt in there, and it'll sort of hold it in place.
But wouldn't I have to be pretty dead center to keep it in balance?
I don't think so. But that's what Fred's guide does, is it centers that drill.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I was wondering what kept it on these 4 years, thing grit and grime. So I went down there today to look at it, and nothing's keeping it on. I pulled on it and it'll come off. I
So
think that
it's the water pump and and what's going to end up happening is going to start rocking, and it's going to beat the shit out of the Woodruff key that's in there. So yeah.
I think the tension on the belt has kept it from moving forward while I'm driving it, but now I'm getting nervous knowing that it's there.
Yeah. So, but an easy out might work too, but I just don't see any way to do any of that in place. But you always try the simplest, cheapest, easiest stuff first. So there are 90-degree drills. You can
That sounds awful.
Okay. Well, taking the radiator out of a TF sounds pretty awful too. So.
Yeah, I don't know. What I don't know.
Okay. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
So Judd says here's a nice link to all the fasteners used on an MGTD. That's cool. Thank you. Brad Schwartz writes in and says Prestige Auto Trim Products is having a sale on tops, seats, carpets, other trim. In the UK, the sale ends in 2 days. So Brad, thank you very much for that. There's something to be said for buying things from England. Very often it's less expensive than buying it here in the United States. Sometimes the quality is better. But speaking of 2 days, we only have until Friday for the summer party. So Marty's got that information in there. John Dykheis. So if you are in 90% humidity in Southeast Michigan and trying to recommission your MG Midget race car, and you drip sweat from your brow onto the distributor, should one use CRC contact cleaner, WD-40, or brake cleaner? And would this also work on my forehead to prevent such a mishap? When we're working, John, are you still out there? Are you still suffering the humidity? Maybe John's gone off already.
I'm here, and I got one of those wrapped around my head.
I use this, but I don't put it in water and I put it around my neck to keep me wet. And it just, when I'm out there in those rolling tech sessions at the big meets, oh my gosh, sometimes I hear my sweat hit the manifold and stuff.
I don't know how you do it, John. I don't know how you do it. You spend the whole day on your feet sweating. but you know, I do it, but nobody's watching me.
Well, that's probably the only reason I'm able to keep up with it, is because people are watching me. I'm on, yeah, I'm performing. So anyway, yeah, good luck, John. I guess I wouldn't use the WD-40 on my forehead. On the other hand, you know, so let's see, David Vasily is very kind. He says here what he said in the beginning, and that is, I don't have to go through all of that, but I do feel that it's for the people who are new, and if I'm begging for money, anyway, it's very kind. Thank you, David. Thanks. So let's see, David Craig, John, I was 68 MGB LH overdrive. It worked great last year, but this year it's intermittent. When it works, it has solid engagement, fluid levels full. I've moved the switch in and out multiple times and shifted from third to fourth, but it won't engage. When I leave the switch on, eventually it'll engage. I've ordered O-rings for the solenoid and the pressure regulator. Any tips you can provide would be helpful. So, Mr. Cray, are you still on? David Cray.
Yeah, I'm here, John.
Okay, all right. So when you're driving, the gear lever, if you pull it to the rear or push it to the right, and if you fiddle with that and see if that makes any difference at all. Because if it does, that means that it's the electrical switch on the top of the gearbox, the least accessible electrical component in the vehicle. It's a bitch to have to change it. Oh my gosh. But if it has to be changed, it has to be changed. So you can also go underneath the car, feed a wire down through the gear lever boot, or take the gear lever boot off, feed a wire down there, plug it into the solenoid, and then have something hot up above and either touch the wires together or with a switch, and just get rid of all the switches, everything in the circuit, and just try it. Does it work or not? And then from that, you can decide what to do. Changing the O-rings is pretty easy, but as long as you're doing that, you should take the plate off the bottom, and then put a drain can underneath there, and it's just going to drip. It drips for an hour, and then you only get an occasional drip in your face when you're underneath there taking a look at it. But it does take a while to drip out. You can drain the gearbox also, and that'll cut down the amount of dripping that it's going to do. And then look up in there, turn to get a bright light, and look right up inside there and find the piston and the cam on the main shaft. With it neutral, turn the drive shaft by hand and watch that piston bob up and down. It doesn't bob about 1/8 of an inch. It's a very, very little tiny bit of movement, but it has to move. So that's the only thing that you can look at besides changing all the O-rings. If it's not bobbing, you can take the oil pump out of there, clean it up. Sometimes it gets dirt on it. That's why you've got that fantastically fine screen grid on above that plate. So all the oil that's getting sucked up into the oil pump is as clean as it can get. They got an incredibly fine mesh grill and screen, and then they got magnets in the bottom there too to pull any swarf out that gets through the screen. But still, you can get crap up in the oil pump, and if it does, it'll gall and it'll stick open, but then it'll never work. It'll stick down.
That's what I would have thought. I would have thought if the pump was bad, it would never engage.
Correct. So almost always it's the electrical. It's that third, fourth switch, and sometimes you can make it. But you want to go out and you know another thing that happens with that switch is it runs good until the car gets hot, and then quits working because the clearances change in the switch. The switch is the same switch as the reverse light switch. The reverse light switch is on. You're looking at the back end of the engine gearbox. Reverse light switch is up around 2 o'clock. Easy, just unscrew it, put a new one in. Easy schmeezy. The third, fourth lockout switch is just, oh my gosh, you got to drop the exhaust, the drive shaft, and then the rear end of the exhaust and reach in from the inside of the car, spin the switch out. That switch has a 14 by 2.0 metric thread on it. So, lots of,
Is it possible to take and just tighten that switch down if it's out of adjustment or not?
no, because they never come loose. But you gain access to that switch by taking the console out. What year's your car?
68.
68. Okay, no, you still have to take the center console out, I think, and take the elliptical plate that goes around the gear lever that's got 3 probably positive drive screws in it. And take the 3 screws out in front and lift that whole plate up. You can look down in there. You can look in there. You can see the switch. You can see the switch, but you can't get to it. You can't get your hands on it. Even
But you say if you drop the transmission, the drive shaft, the cross member, and the exhaust, it'll drop down enough to get your hand up in there.
Oh yeah, it's easy schmeezy. Just real straightforward. But diagnose it first, you know, by using a hot wire or something going down to the solenoid.
Okay, thanks, John.
Okay, good luck.
John, can I just suggest something? I have a Healy 3000, and the fix for that is to temporarily put a bulb in that wire, and then you can see when the circuit is made because the bulb will light up. So just somewhere you can see when you're driving, and then you can see whether it's the overdrive engaged when the bulb comes on.
Sure, that would work. That would work too. Absolutely.
Good idea.
All right. Now we're down to David Basili, and we got we already talked about that. Tom Capehart, what's the best way to determine whether a TD front coil spring needs a replacement? The static length is within spec, but there's some rust on them. Just offhand, coil springs never go bad. That's the rule. They don't go bad. The leaf springs do. Tom, are you still on?
Yep, I'm on.
Okay, so usually what happens is you get the bachelor lean, right? The leaf spring goes bad at the left rear of the car, although to Tim Smith, I guess that's the right-hand side. And then the car pivots on the diagonal. So here in this country, the left-hand rear spring sags, so the right front of the car goes up. Goes up, and so you're looking at the front of your car, you're going, oh my gosh, I need coil springs because they're different heights, but you don't. It's just the back. So you can sandblast those springs. You can put them on a wire wheel too, and just wire wheel them until you're happy, and just coat them up with black paint, and they'll be fine. If the static link is okay, they're okay.
That's great. That's great to know. Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Yep, you're welcome. Pablo and everybody, thanks for sharing your knowledge. Can you recommend a source for thread gauges for Whitworth and other type no longer used? Oh, let's see. No, that's an easy question to answer. I don't know. It used to be, I can't remember who it was. Somebody out in New York sold all the British bolts and nuts, but they don't anymore. They used to have thread gauges. They handed them out to us to hand out at the parties for prizes and stuff like that. So a metric pitch gauge, that's easy. American one, but a British one at 55. I don't know. Fred, well, how about you? Do you have a clue? Is Fred still on?
Yeah, I don't have a gauge for those. I just use my taps and dies for measuring stuff. But no, I don't have a gauge for those.
Okay. Draper, Draper. That's a British tool manufacturer. God knows they're gone now or absorbed by some Japanese or Chinese firm. But Draper used to be. They made tap and die sets. So I bet you if you go on Amazon or eBay and look for Draper British pitch guide or something like that, it'll come up. I bet. John Uhas, tonight the topic was fascinating. Thank you. I love threads. I just love talking about them, but I just figured it's like boring to so many. Just want to give Dean Hickenlooper a big thanks to Barney Gaylord for rescuing me on the way home from GT 49. I lost a freeze plug 20 minutes from the resort, and Barney came straight away at 6 a.m. with a freeze plug out of his magic trailer and had us back on the road in 2 hours. So, Dean and Barney, that's not Barney. Are you on tonight? I didn't see your name up yet. Another interesting thing happened on the way home to Carol Luft. She's driving her MGA, and her husband in his MGA, Terry, is behind her. And Carol suddenly is off the road because her right front wheel has come off her car. It's come off at speed. So Terry goes walking down the road and finds the rim, finds the wire wheel. The spinner, which you could never find, is attached to the wheel. He has to use a hammer to drive the spinner off the wheel. Of course, after our long distance talk that we had 2 weeks ago or 2 times ago, where he and Carol campaigned heavily, and Bob and Gloria Cook. We got 540,000 miles in MGB, and we talked about everything from tools to packing to cooking. Very hardly, I don't think anyone said they took an extra spinner, but Terry said, I always take an extra spinner. And so he was able to knock the spinner off that wheel with a hammer. The threads on the inside of the spinner were destroyed. That was his one word, destroyed. And he put the wheel back on, put the spinner on, and they drove home. What's that all about? I have no idea. Anyway.
Wouldn't you have to carry 2 of them? One for each side?
Left and right, absolutely. Yep. And he did carry one for each side. So
we carry whatever has broken, we carry one now.
okay. All right. God, you just never lose it. If you lose a spinner, you lose it, right? I mean, you can find the wheel. Maybe you can find the wheel. I don't know where they were, someplace where the grass wasn't too deep, I guess. But you can find the wheel, but you never can find the spinner. But here he found the spinner still jammed on the wheel. God, I was hoping maybe beyond tonight we could talk about it. So anyway, John Uhas says another discussion in depth would be the rack and pinion. Okay, so that's got on the end of an MGB rack, that's 1 inch in diameter where those ball joint threads screw on. That's like 1 inch, and it's a relatively coarse thread, 8 for that size. Maybe 20 threads per inch, something like that. I found a die. I've got a die for that, for the MGB. Yeah, we'll do rack and pinions. Sure, absolutely. Soon. So, all right, Jim Nybert, recommend you spend some time in the future Zoom to present your ideas on the decline of the British auto industry. You had a good start tonight. I think it'd be very informative and entertaining. Just for the history of it. Thank you very much, Jim. That would be nice. Geez, I ought to get Tim Whistler on. He teaches at State College, PA. He wrote the book. We'll have to see. So that's a really good idea. Marty's writing all this stuff down so that we can remember it next time. Oh, here we got one from Janet and Reg. Brake problem, MGA, rear brakes leak at the banjo. I've tried various copper washers, annealed them, and they still leak. Might I be over tightening them? I don't think so. We just had the same thing with brake problem. So the brake fluid, are you still on?
Yeah, John. Yeah, I am on. I'm on.
So you've got the banjo, you got the banjo bolt, you got the 2 washers.
Yeah.
You've tightened it up and it will not seal.
No, they won't seal. The right rear is the worst.
New,
I've even gone to the extent of taking emery paper on, on a flat
Yeah.
surface and taken all of the surface and then flat surface them on the bench. The darn thing's been leaking since we put the car together about 1.5 years ago.
new cylinder,
Yeah, new wheel cylinder.
buy another one. If the plane for the banjo is not perpendicular to the bolt, it's been drilled on an angle, if the bolt's on an angle, you'll never get it to seal. So, I mean, a new cylinder is what, $25, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I'd go there and get some new washers. You might, like inspect the banjo real carefully, just for fun, take the brake line out of it and just check it.
Done that already, but I haven't, I'm still got, I'll go the wheel cylinder route and have one
Yeah,
sent
I
up.
think that's it. Use it. Real creepy having leaking brakes. Even
Never had them done earlier cars, but this one is just a B.
Yeah, well, probably that's it. So
thanks, John.
All right, thank you. Judd, you wanted me to look at a part? I
Well, I got a picture up there. I just didn't know if you had time. I see some other people have come on.
Well, that's the top steering column bushing for not a 77 through 80 and not a 62 through 67. But
68 MJC.
Okay, all right.
And all the little balls fell out, and the races were really grunged up, and the steering wheel rattled like crazy and wiggled all around. And my research indicated that innards of that are unobtainium. And so we are in process. We did make, and it works beautifully, a bushing to go in there, and the steering wheel is very snug, smooth as glass, and doesn't rattle.
How very cool is that? That looks like it's out of wood. That doesn't look like it's plastic.
That's wood. That's called lignin vita, and it's what they used to use for making the the bushings to go through the hull on ships for their propeller shaft in old ships.
Okay, well, it sounds like you're using the right stuff. Oh my gosh, yeah, yep.
Just so rare to actually make something instead of just swap parts.
Yep, how cool is that? How cool is that? So that original one, you had a couple of shims and then that horseshoe clip, so that you had to get all lined up there because that held the column, that held the inner steering column from pulling out of the outer steering column. So you've accounted for that somehow.
Yeah, that's correct. It's got a snap ring around it to keep it from doing that.
Okay, all right. How cool is that? How cool is that? That's really nice. So, this is a cottage industry. But at the same token, if you talk to your insurance man first, he'll tell you don't go there. So
you'll notice I haven't identified the owner of the car.
Okay. All right. Yeah. How cool is that? That's absolutely wonderful. It's real nice. Real nice. Congratulations for doing that. That is nice. So. All right, Paul M to everybody. MGTD light bracket bolts that fasten to the fender. Are they through bolts or studs? If studs, can they be removed? I have one of each. So they are studs. They're shouldered studs that in their the thread on either end is 5/16 22 BSF. But the problem is that if it's broken, that must be what you're going for. Paul, are you on? Have you waited all this time for me to get to you? We're not
Yes, I'm on, and I
All
came
right.
on late, so I didn't have to wait very long at all.
Yeah, okay. So, oh yeah, those are snapped off. So, and you've already got them, you've already got it chromed. Are the arms are chromed? Looks like they were chromed.
Yes. Yeah, I bought the car totally disassembled and I'm trying to put it together now. And I got
Okay.
through bolts on one side.
Yep.
And then I guess the original studs on the other.
Yep. So, you know, you can get the studs out, but you got to heat it up. That's going to wreck the chrome. So what I think I would do is center punch those, drill them 1/8 inch, walk it up to 1/4 inch, tap it, and then use a big washer and a bolt to hold those in place. They really don't have to hold very much weight. It's not original, you know, and you're gonna have to put some tape on your drill so you don't drill up through the top. But that would be the poor man's solution to that, is just drill it. You don't want to go 5/16 because that's the size of the original stud. So just go 1/4 inch and just American fine and just make it work like that. I know you'll be able to.
Yes. Okay. I'm a poor man, so that'll work for me.
Okay, all right. Yep. Yep. And then I was going to say, how can you fake it? How can you fake it? You got to have a 5/16 BSF nut underneath there with a stud sticking out. Now we're getting too complicated. So, all right. So next question up is from Sam Chapin. John, do you still recommend 55 pounds torque for head bolts on an 18V MGB engine? Yes, I always take it up to 55. That's that oiled 55.
Okay.
Yep. It just is
It's just the book says 45 to 50. Haynes, I believe.
Yeah.
And I hit 55 and snapped number one.
That's on you. You got new studs. That doesn't happen with a factory stud.
Moss studs, brand new.
Okay. They should not snap. They should not snap at that point.
It's been off 3 times since I put it on.
You still have the original studs?
I've got a few of them, yeah.
My go-to guys for used stuff. Well, first of all, you can buy ARP studs, right? That $400 for a set or something.
$200 a set.
Yeah, okay. So, all right. So there's nothing wrong with the original studs. Nothing wrong with them. Take the 55. And if you don't have another MG owner around that you can glean some from, call Sports Car Craftsman in Denver, Colorado, and just ask them for a handful of them. You know, I mean, you need 11 studs, 7 shorts and 4 longs, so you know what you've got already. And and ask them. And for the nuts, they must have a massive bucket of them. Nobody ever wants them. So
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks. I appreciate that. Only snapped manifold stud and a head stud so far. So
I've got a head stud that I drilled. I put on my lathe and I put a reverse drill in it. I put the 3/8 studs. That must be a 5/16. And so if it snaps off right at the head, you can center drill it. Otherwise, if it's down below the head, I take this reverse drill, which is in the stud, and I just put it down there and have somebody standing with a blowgun blowing the swarf and chips out of the way, and you can drill. Finally snags it and pulls it right back up the hole.
no, the head bolt was easier to drill and get out than the manifold bolt. That was a nuisance. But I didn't think it would happen because it's an aluminum head. So that just scares the hell out of me now. But anyway, thank you.
The factory ones will be okay. Okay, Brian, at Calgary at the Namgabur meet let's see, what's the 24, MG23 in Calgary last year, you confirmed that I needed a new exhaust system. It looked fine on the outside, was rotten on the inside. I just had it replaced, and my mechanic tells me the wrong bolts had been used for the last one, and he had a heck of a time changing them. I don't know the details, but we'll ask when I pick up the car tomorrow. Just a fastener story that has a minor connection to you. Okay, so it's probably the bolts. I wonder what, Brian, are you still on? What year is that car?
Hi, yeah, it's a 74.
So these are the studs that hang off the bottom of the exhaust manifold.
I believe it is, yeah. I just talked to him very briefly, but I think they were the manifold ones. Yeah.
Yeah, those are if they've been drilled out, then it's real frustrating. You can put helicoils in there. The best thing
He
to do.
did say, I actually know what a helicoil is, but he did say that he used one. Yeah.
Well, hey, he's got to guarantee the work, so he's done it up there. But yeah, it's frustrating when the DPO, I think that's the dumb previous owner, right? Has botched something up, but sometimes it's not even the owner's fault. They've taken it to get an exhaust, and the guy at the exhaust store, he's getting paid to get that job out, and he's got all the tricks, and he'll do anything he can to just get it jammed up and tight, so anyway.
Yeah, no, I don't really know what happened before there, but I did get a lot of years use out of it. The bill was a little more than I was expecting because of this, but yeah, that's all.
Hey, great.
I've seen a lot of exhaust manifolds. They're supposed to be coarse thread into the casting, but I've seen a lot of coarse thread to coarse thread. So it's coarse thread into the casting and then coarse threads on the outside. And I work on an MGA right now. There's coarse threads sticking down, and that's not right.
Okay.
So is it worth taking the whole manifold off, to get the right thread on there? Take the whole manifold off, eat the end of it, get the old ones out, put the correct ones in. Oh my gosh. But we always use on the exhaust, I always use prevailing torque nuts. They use brass nuts, and those brass nuts just come loose. They just do. They don't rust to the stud. That's their advantage. But I use prevailing torque nuts, and a lot of anti-seize, and get that on there, and then those prevailing torque nuts do not come loose.
John, I had the same problem with my B. Somebody had changed the studs to the next size larger, and I could not put things together then. I had to go back to get the original size in there again.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, well, it's just, there's a lot of different threads on the car. It's just, like at every step, you just do the right repair, but sometimes, the cars have gone through periods where they were only worth $500, some of them, and MGAs. I just talked to a guy the other day who said, the guy gave me an MGA, and I said, a guy gave me an MGA, that wouldn't happen today. It wasn't much of a gift. They took the front of it off and put sort of a shark mouth on it. It was a very odd looking thing, but the chassis was, anyway, yeah, sometimes those repairs are done, by somebody who's just got to get it done. John Dykes has a thread gauges, the threadcheck.co or threadcheck.com, British thread gauges. So that's John Dykes has got a thing in the chat there about how you can get a thread gauge at threadcheck.com. That's very cool. Thank you. David Vasily says, what is meant by the term banjo when describing fittings? So a banjo is I'm thinking of a banjo, the instrument, and it's a cylinder, very short cylinder, but a round, and then of course the banjo's got the side on it, but the banjo part is the round part. So a banjo fitting on an MGA would be the banjo fitting that goes on the back of the block for the oil filter or on the oil filter assembly if you've got a late model MGB, or the fittings for the fuel line on an MGA, or the fittings for the fuel line on an MGB fuel pump. So they're round fittings, and through that fitting goes a bolt, washers on both sides, like on the clutch master cylinder on all MGBs. And then there's a bolt that goes through there, a banjo bolt that's drilled through the center and drilled cross-filled, so the fluid can get from the banjo in and out of the cylinder. So it's the round. It just means round.
John, I put at the bottom of the chat a link to a video online that describes that banjo belt. I don't know if he can use it or not, but
okay,
he's welcome to it. It's at the bottom of the chat thing.
Yeah, thanks. We get a lot of information here about the New York-based company. I can't remember who we used to buy British nuts and bolts from British Fasteners. But it wasn't British Fast. They sold everything. It was like McMaster Carr, and I don't know if McMaster Carr sells British stuff. Francis Byrne has got a good link on here about the difference between Phillips and Posidrive. Marty's got Sports Car Craftsman. She's put in their information, and here's Judd's a video about banjos. So. And then Stephen says, when will this particular meeting be posted to YouTube for later repeated viewing? And my standard line is soon. I've got them up through the week up before the last one. I've got them all hanging out there in YouTube land, but Marty still has to do some work on a couple of them to get them up. But all I can do is tell you soon, Stephen. So
yeah, they were stuck with John for a long time. Now they're stuck with me because I've been working on the summer reunion registration. So yeah, we're working on it.
All right, well, that's it. We're down to the end. Oh, we got one more. We got one more new. Oh yeah. When people ask me when I'll get my MGB running, I say soon too. So, yeah. Anyway, thanks everybody for being on tonight. And I was going to ask, just a minute, let me just see if I got everything sorted out here that I talked about. We didn't talk about light bulb threads, but we did talk about the reverse light switch thread. Doug Clark, are you on tonight? Sometimes this interferes with one of his other things. Well,
I don't think he's on.
We don't hear Doug, but because I brought my hat, I had a lawyer in Wisconsin who would come to the summer party every year, and every year he brought me a different hat. So this is the Bobby hat. Tim, if Tim's still on from London, he'll recognize this. But anyway, this is the Bobby hat. So, oh no, what was that guy's name? He's a lawyer, and he brought me. Oh my gosh, he brought me maybe 6 hats over the course of 6 years. So anyway, I'll try. I have already shown that once to Doug Clark, but we'll wait for next time. See if I can get him. He always has hats that look the same, except the 5th helmets. But anyway, everyone.
My attendance count was 142.
Okay.
Since Doug's not here, we're gonna have to go with my number.
All right. Okay, 142. That's very kind. Thank you. Thanks. All right. Well, again, if you're close to Michigan and want to come to our summer party, please sign up for it. Please get that done so we can get our counts. They're coming right down where we have to have the right number of people for dinners and sandwiches and rooms and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to come along, it's just it's a fun weekend, meet a bunch of other MG people. So anyway, and our next meeting will be, let me just see here. I think it'll probably be the 12th, but the weekend, I don't know about the 26th. I think I'm gonna be en route because that weekend I will be in Altoona. So I don't know if I'll be back, but let's go, I'd say the 5th, but I'm not gonna be here. And today's the 29th, so let's go for the 12th. The 12th. What are we going to talk about? I don't know. Something fun, you know. Probably I gotta get my numbers back up. Probably won't be the history of the MG car company, which is interesting in itself. You know, did it start in 1923 or 24 or 25? Marty and I have this same discussion. When did I open my doors, you know, for University Motors? Was it 73? Was it 74? The stand, we always go with 1975 because that's when I opened it up for full-time business. But anyway, I will look forward to seeing everybody next time, and maybe some other people too. So thank you very kindly, everyone, for being on. If you got any questions, you can always call me. You can go on my website, universitymotors.online. My contact information is there if you got some questions. This morning I heard from Guy St. John from Ann Arbor, who called me last week, and he said that he was doing a Mini. It's driving him crazy. He said flat out the thing just ran so great, but mid-range it was just awful. It just and we had a Pertronics modern distributor in it. So I said, well, maybe that's it. So we swapped that out, no difference. And I don't know, why did he go inside the carburetors? Oh, he's gonna drain out the oil, drain out the lightweight oil in the carburetors. So we took the suction chambers off, turned the pistons upside down. In so doing, of course, he's involved with a spring on top of the air piston inside the carburetor. And he said it was so soft, it was like brushing red hair out of your girlfriend's face. There's just nothing to it. It was so soft. He goes, I just put another set of springs in there, stiffer, which push the piston down, which makes it run richer. And he said, now it runs so well, so great. And it was just changing a pair of carburetor springs. So you never know where diagnosis is going to take you. I talked to Glenn. Why did I talk to Glenn last week? I don't remember now. I'm going to try to call that up and see if I can think of why he called me. Something going on. So there's always surprises, and there's thread surprises. I still don't know what thread the MGB straight cap rod bolt is. I called British Leyland once back when British Leyland existed in 1980, and asked their tech guy. They had a tech guy there, and he says, "Well, I don't know. I thought you'd know." It's like, well, geez, I know it. But it's not. It looks like 5/16 is fine, but it's some other kind of thread. I don't know what kind of thread it is. So there's still.
You should have phoned the politician.
Yeah. It's made. Yeah. Yeah. Why not? It was made in Canvey Island, right? Because that in this country, all the politicians have, that everybody wants to have armed forces bases in their state because it's such a lot of money that trickles in, and they got to have a certain number of companies in their state that are getting government contracts. It's only fair, there's a lot of wrangling for that. So who knows? Maybe it was a politician. Probably not, but maybe it was a politician.
Don't trust politicians. You know how you can tell they're lying?
Yeah.
Their lips are moving.
Yeah. All right, well, everyone, thank you very kindly, and we'll look forward to talking to you next time. So Ron Nugent, I was just out there. I thought about calling you, but I was only on Los Feliz Avenue there for a day with my daughter, and you might still be up at your cottage anyway. There's a big fire going on up there right now.
There are fires all over California right now.
That was one of the reasons my daughter wanted to get me out of Portland, because there are fires up there. And she said, you know, if it isn't Delta with some snafu with ticketing, you know, then they're going to close down the airport because of smoke or, you know, something.
Most are up in the Central California and up in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada.
Okay, all right.
I heard on the news that somebody pushed a burning car off a cliff and started.
Yeah,
fire.
arson. They come out every summer, the arson wackos in California, every summer.
Why not? You know, why not? So, oh my gosh.
People are nuts.
Yep. So, well, anyway, thanks to everybody for signing in tonight, and Tim, thanks for signing in all the way from. My God, it must be, if it's 9 o'clock here, what's it, 2 o'clock in the morning where you are?
Yeah, 2:15.
Oh my gosh! All right. All right. Well, good luck with your Bentley. Was it about a 1934? A real that kind of Bentley?
1926.
Oh my.
Vandenpla.
Oh my.
Hasn't been moved for 63 years.
So has that got some great big blower on the front of the crank and stuff?
No, it's only a 3 liter, but 4 valves a cylinder.
Oh my gosh.
Twin spark plugs, quite good technology. It's a 5-year project for me.
Sounds like a Meadows engine.
No, proper Bentley,
Okay,
designed
right.
by Bentley.
Yep.
And amazingly, a guy emailed me today, and he has this sequentially the chassis before mine. They must have been made at the same time. And he saw I'd bought mine at auction and said, I own the next chassis or the previous chassis number. Small world.
Small world. Yeah, absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing.
And the
Right.
British make the finest motor cars in the world. Rolls Royce, Bentley.
Yeah, well, that's the new Bentley. The old Bentley, those are the race cars. The one that James Bond drove. Yeah.
Is that the sports saloon? It looks like, I mean, it's huge. It's good grief. If that's the 3 liter sports saloon?
It's an open car. I'm on holiday on the 12th, but I'm sure I can make it work. I'll put it as my background. I never have my photo because then you'll see much more of me than you'd want to see because I'm in bed. But I'll try and put it up as the background. But it's just, I've always wanted a Bentley, and this car came along at auction. And I only say this because you can look it up, but we paid in US $230,000 for it. My wife said, "Does it start?"
My dad told me that you should always test drive a car before you buy it. What are you doing? Yeah. Oh my God.
Anyway, I'll put it up as the background.
All right. Good luck. So
thank
all right.
you.
All right. To everybody else, thank you very kindly.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. We'll look forward to it.
Good
night.
Good night.
Thank you, John. Always great.
John Clark, I think I'm going to be at the shop sometime tomorrow, but John Clark, I will let you know. So okay, doke. All right.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John. Great session.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Night, everyone.
Go to that website, press that PayPal button. So, all right. Okay. All right. Good night.
Good night, John.
Night.
Good night, Crystal.